listen along. So at this point, after we got chapter 13, which is about the effect on Hester's, the punishment, the effect of the punishment on Hester, up at 122, and Hester at this point sees Chillingsworth, and she goes to talk to him, and he has changed a lot. The old man was shocked as well as wonder-smitten to discern what a change had been wrought upon him within the past 7 years. It was not so much he had grown older, for though the traces of advancing life were visible, he bore his age well and seemed to retain a wiry vigor and alertness. But the former aspect of an intellectual and studious man, calm and quiet, which was what she had remembered in him, had altogether vanished, and been succeeded by an eager, searching, almost fierce, guarded look. Ever and anon, too, there came a glare of red light out of his eyes, as if the old man's soul were on fire, and kept on smoldering duskily within his breast, until, by some casual puff of passion, it was blown into a momentary flame. This he repressed as speedily as possible, and strove to look as if nothing of the kind had happened. So she can start to see him turning more devilish, right? His appearance changes, the look in his eye changes, just kind of the whole way he presents himself has changed. And I think it's interesting and good that they describe it as a flame, because, you know, when the fuel is gone from the flame, which is what happens when Dimmesdale dies at the end, then the flame goes out, which is kind of what happened to Chillingsworth at the end. In a word, old Roger Chillingsworth was a striking evidence of a man's faculty of transforming himself into a devil, if he will only, for a reasonable space of time, undertake a devil's office. This unhappy person had effected such a transformation by devoting himself for 7 years to the constant analysis of a heart full of torture, and deriving his enjoyment thence, and adding fuel to those fiery tortures which he analyzed and gloated over. The Scarlet Letter burned on Hester's bosom. Okay, so we see how this process is taking place with Chillingsworth, and also, if you remember back a couple, I don't remember exactly what chapter it was, but how Hester felt sometimes one of the weird effects of the Scarlet Letter is that it allowed her to sense sin in other people. Either the Scarlet Letter was burning or tingling, or she could just get a sense, even if she was walking around with her head down, when she came upon someone else who was doing evil things. And this really kind of resonates right now as she's seeing just exactly how evil Chillingsworth has become. Go to page 125, and here's Chillingsworth himself talking about, it was one of those moments which sometimes occur only at the interval of years when a man's moral aspect is faithfully revealed in his mind's eye. And it's like all of a sudden Chillingsworth kind of starts to see a little bit of what's happened to him. And Hester says, "Hast thou tortured him enough?" Said Hester, noticing the old man's look. "Has he not paid thee all?" "No, no, he's but increased the debt," answered the minister as he proceeded. His manner lost its fiercer characteristics and subsided in gloom. Then he kind of reflects a little bit on the person he used to be, you know, when they were married back in Europe. "But all my life had been made up of earnest, studious, thoughtful, quiet years, bestowed faithfully for the increase of mine own knowledge, and faithfully, too, for this latter object was but a casual to the other, faithfully for the advancement of human welfare. No life had been more peaceful or innocent than mine, few lives so rich with benefits conferred. Dost thou remember me? Was I not, though you might deem me cold, nevertheless a man thoughtful of others, caring for, craving little for himself, kind, true, just, and of constant, if not warm affections? Was I not all this?" "All this and more," said Hester. "And what am I now?" demanded he, looking into her face, permitting the whole evil within him to be written on his features. "I have already told thee what I am, a fiend, and what made me so." "It was myself," cried Hester, shuddering. "It was I, not less than he. Why hast thou not avenged thyself on me?" So, I think in some ways this is Chillingsworth a little ways to try to keep Hester in her place and to make sure that Hester's not going to go do anything and talk to Dimmesdale about what's going on, by getting her to kind of take this blame on herself and feel worse about this herself. And Chillingsworth said, "I mean, the reason I'm not doing anything to you is the letter's done everything to you. It's changed, as you look at some of the things you were looking at in chapter 13, it's changed the way she's looked. She's not beautiful anymore. She doesn't even look all that feminine anymore. She has no friend. She has no one to be warm or affectionate with. She's got nothing other than Pearl and the Scarlet Letter." And then, Hester at the end of this chapter says, "And I thee, for hatred that has transformed a wise and just man to a fiend, wilt thou yet purge it yet once more and be human? Who are we who are here wandering together in this gloomy maze of evil and stumbling at every step over the guilt wherewith we have strewn our path? It is not so. There must be good for thee, and thee alone, since thou hast been deeply wronged and hast it at thy will to pardon. Wilt thou give up that only privilege? Wilt thou reject that priceless benefit?" And he says no. And this is kind of where Hester makes up her mind that she's got to go have that conversation in the woods with Dimmesdale. The one where you want to punch Dimsdale in the face. Where I'm just gonna lay down on the ground, die in the leaves, Esther, make up my mind for me. Sorry. I like doing Dimsdale impression. Anyway, Chillingsworth goes on, by at that first step awry, thou didst plant a germ of evil, but since that moment it's been a dark necessity. Ye that have wronged me are not sinful, save in a kind of typical illusion. Neither am I fiend-like, who have snatched the fiend's office from his hands. It is our fate. Let the black flower blossom as it may. So remember all the times flowers and red roses have come up. Red roses serves as sweet moral blossom on this tale of darkness and frailty, or whatever it was. It was something positive that you can take from this. The other plants that we've seen, whether it's the dark weed growing up out of the dude's heart who was buried in the cemetery, or at this point the black flower, clearly are not sweet moral blossoms, and this is kind of the opposite side of that. Going on, then we get Pearl. And Pearl, opposite of Chillingsworth, and kind of opposite of Hester's, this is done pretty good for her, in some ways anyway. On 131, and we kind of talked about this in one of the classes yesterday, this kind of just shows who Hester has become, and because she has no one to play with, doesn't have any friends, and it's not like Puritan kids would have been out having a great time anyway. But Pearl, whose activity of spirit never flagged, had been at no loss for amusement while her mother had talked with the old gatherer of herbs. At first, as already told, she had flirted fancifully with her own image in a pool of water, beckoning the phantom forth, and as it declined to venture, seeking a passage for herself into the sphere of impalpable earth and unattainable sky. Soon finding, however, that either she or the image was unreal, she turned elsewhere for better pastime. She made little boats out of birch bark, and freighted them with sea snails, and sent out more ventures unto the mighty deep than any merchant in New England. But the larger part of them foundered near the shore. She seized a live horseshoe by the tail, and made a prize of several 5 fingers, and laid out a jellyfish to melt in the warm sun. She's kind of mean to animals sometimes, but then she took the white foam that streaked the line of the advancing tide and threw it on the breeze, scampering after it with winged footsteps to catch the great snowflakes ere they fell. So she becomes very creative and imaginative, and a lot of qualities you would like in a kid, outside of the animal abuse, like where she one little gray bird with a white breast, Pearl was almost sure had been hit by a pebble and fluttered away with a broken wing. But then the elf child sighed and gave up her sport because it grieved her to have done harm to a little being that was as wild as the sea breeze or as wild as Pearl herself. Her final employment was to gather seaweed of various kinds and make herself a scarf, or mantle, or headdress, and thus assume an aspect of a little mermaid. She inherited her mother's gift for devising drapery and costume. So she just becomes an interesting, kind of cool, creative little kid. And she becomes smart, and she becomes tough. Going on a little bit, onto the next page, after Pearl then used seaweed and makes a green letter on her own chest. And Mom kind of laughs that off, and then they have another little conversation about what the letter means. And this has come up a couple different times, from when Pearl was a little tiny baby to when Pearl was a toddler, and now I think Pearl's about 7. And so this is a little bit more serious conversation about this. Dost thou know, child, wherefore thy mother wears this letter? Truly I do, answered Pearl, looking brightly into her mother's face. It's the same reason that the minister keeps his hand over his heart. And what reason is that? Asked Hester, half smiling at the absurd incongruity of the child's observation, but on second thoughts turning pale. Pearl nailed it right there. Okay, she doesn't know what hand over heart symbol means. She doesn't know what letter A symbol means, but she knows somehow they're connected. Okay, so Hester's got her punishment and her sin out in front for everybody to see, and Dimsdale keeps covering it up, trying to hide his heart and hide who he really is from everybody else. What has the letter to do with any heart save mine? Nay, mother, I have told all I know, said Pearl more seriously than she was wont to speak. Ask yonder old man whom thou hast been talking with, and maybe he can tell. But in good earnest now, mother dear, what does the scarlet letter mean, and why dost thou wear it on thy bosom, and why does the minister keep his hand over his heart? So you can imagine what's going on in Hester's mind at this point. Okay, and she knows that if Pearl wasn't as smart as she was and as observant as she was, she might not have made any of these connections at all. But clearly, the process of being excluded from town, being an outcast, and seeing the way the whole town treats her mother, and seeing all the way the children treat her, has had some impact on Pearl in terms of making her a stronger, more independent, and clearly smarter and creative person. Going on a little bit, on 133, but now the idea came strongly into Hester's mind that Pearl, with her remarkable precocity and acuteness, might already have approached the age when she could be made a friend, and entrusted with as much of the mother's sorrow as could be imparted without irreverence either to the parent or child. In the little chaos of Pearl's character, there might have been seen emerging, and could have been from the very first, the steadfast principles of an unflinching courage, an uncontrollable will, a sturdy pride, which might be disciplined into self-respect, and a bitter scorn of many things, which when examined might have found a taint of falsehood to them. Okay, so if you remember kind of what you're talking about in chapter 13, that's what Hester did, right? It's caused her to really examine Puritan society and all the conventions of it, whether it's the gender roles and the way women are treated in society, or Puritan society as a whole. I mean, Hester basically says in her mind, if she didn't say it, because A, who's she going to say it to, and B, these are fairly dangerous things to say, that really the only thing to be done with Puritan society is to tear it down and start over. And if the Puritan elders had known that this was going to be the effect, that's a pretty scary thing. And really, as we've talked about a number of times, Pearl's the only thing that keeps Hester from going down Anna Hutchinson path. Excuse me. She possessed affections, too, that hitherto acrid and disagreeable are the richest flavors of the unripe fruit. With all these sterling attributes, thought Hester, the evil which she inherited from her mother must be great indeed if a noble woman do not grow out of this elfish child. And she does. At the end, we know that that after Dimmesdale kind of accepts Pearl and makes it known to everybody that he's baby daddy, that Pearl grows up to be a strong, good, well-adjusted person. And it was that moment when he kisses her, and it says something to the effect of the spell was broken, and it allowed Pearl to grow up and be the type of person that she could become. And so there's so many different angles to the Scarlet Letter and the effect that this punishment has on both her and her mother and Dimmesdale and Chillingworth that were not really intended at all. I mean, the initial thing that they set up to do was to make Hester a living sermon of sin, so that everywhere she walks, everyone knows what she did, and that does happen. That she learned her lesson from this, and that does